When I first married Daniel, I thought I had it all. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside of Chicago, where the streets curved like a maze of secrets, and the houses looked so similar that you could forget where your home started and your neighbors ended. We had been together for 8 years, married for 6, and while things weren't always perfect, I believed we were solid. Daniel was dependable, responsible, the kind of man who kept promises even if he struggled to show emotions. I had convinced myself that his silence meant strength. But life has a strange way of showing you truths you weren't ready to face. It all started with Daniel's best friend, Ryan. He had been in our lives since before I came along, and although I never considered him anything more than Daniel's buddy, he was always present. He was different from my husband in every possible way. Where Daniel was reserved, Ryan was warm, funny, and always full of stories. He worked in construction, a job that gave him confidence and a casual charm, and people seemed to gravitate toward him. I never thought much about him until one night when Daniel was scheduled for an overnight business trip. He kissed me goodbye with his usual hurried affection, suitcase in hand, and was gone before I could even ask when he'd be back. I remember standing at the doorway, watching his car disappear down the street, and feeling that familiar ache in my chest, the loneliness that had crept into our marriage over the years. Later that evening, Ryan showed up unexpectedly. He had stopped by to drop off some tools he had borrowed from Daniel, but when he noticed I was struggling to carry in the groceries, he offered to help. At first, it felt harmless. He carried the heavy bags inside, made a few jokes about how Daniel never lifted a finger in the kitchen, and before I knew it, he was helping me put everything away. His presence filled the silence of the house in a way that startled me. We ended up sitting at the kitchen table, sipping on iced tea while the rain tapped steadily against the windows. The conversation flowed easily, unlike with Daniel, where words often felt like they were walking on eggshells. Ryan asked questions about my day, my job at the elementary school, and even remembered little details I had mentioned months ago. The attention felt intoxicating because I couldn't remember the last time Daniel had listened to me that way. The turning point happened when Ryan noticed the leaky faucet in the kitchen sink. Without hesitation, he rolled up his sleeves and started working on it. I stood nearby, handing him tools, watching how effortlessly he moved. His confidence, his focus, the way he seemed so present, it was all so different from Daniel's distant, distracted energy. At one point, his hand brushed against mine when I passed him a wrench, and the spark that shot through me was undeniable. I quickly looked away, pretending it hadn't happened, but deep inside, I felt something shifting. That night stretched longer than I expected. The storm outside grew louder, and by the time Ryan finished fixing the sink, it was pouring. He suggested he should head home, but the weather made it dangerous, and without even thinking, I insisted he stay until it calmed down. We sat back at the table, the soft glow of the kitchen light illuminating his face, and for the first time in years, I felt seen. It didn't happen all at once. Infidelity rarely does. It begins in the tiny cracks of a marriage where loneliness and neglect seep in. It grows in the moments of laughter you share with someone who shouldn't matter, in the glances that last a little longer than they should, in the secrets you don't even realize you're keeping. Over the next few weeks, Ryan came around more often, sometimes with an excuse, a broken ladder, a borrowed drill, but sometimes with nothing at all. And I let him. Every time Daniel was away for work or too busy with his phone, Ryan filled the silence. I told myself it was innocent, but I knew deep down it wasn't. One evening, when Daniel was away on yet another trip, Ryan helped me clean up after a small neighborhood barbecue we had hosted. Everyone else had left, and the house smelled of grilled food and smoke. I was tired, a little tipsy, and grateful for the help. We laughed as we washed dishes side by side, our shoulders brushing occasionally, sending shivers down my spine. At one point, I dropped a glass, and it shattered across the floor. I gasped, embarrassed, but Ryan simply took my hands in his, checking if I had cut myself. His hands lingered on mine, firm but gentle, and when I looked up, our eyes locked. I don't know who moved first, but the kiss happened. It was soft, tentative, but it carried years of suppressed emotion. I pulled away almost immediately, my heart pounding in my chest, guilt crashing over me. Ryan apologized, his voice low and sincere, but the truth was, I didn't want him to apologize. I wanted him to do it again. From that night on, everything spiraled. I tried to convince myself it was a one-time mistake, but the pull between us was undeniable. We started meeting in secret, small moments stolen when Daniel wasn't around. It was reckless, dangerous, and every second of it was laced with both excitement and guilt. I loved Daniel, or at least I thought I did, but what I felt with Ryan was something I couldn't ignore. The affair grew heavier, and soon, the weight of the lies began to crush me. Daniel wasn't stupid. He noticed I was distracted, that I smiled more at my phone than I did at him. He asked questions I dodged, gave me looks I couldn't interpret, and yet he never confronted me directly. Maybe he didn't want to believe it, or maybe he already knew. The breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon. Daniel had returned early from a trip without telling me, and when he walked into the house, Ryan was there. We had been sitting too close on the couch, our voices low, the kind of closeness that didn't need words to be suspicious. Daniel froze at the doorway, his face unreadable, and I felt the blood drain from mine. In that instant, everything shattered. Daniel didn't yell or rage like I expected. Instead, he set down his bag, looked at Ryan, then at me, and quietly said, "I knew." His voice was calm, too calm, and it was more terrifying than if he had screamed. Ryan left immediately, the silence between us deafening. When the door closed behind him, I tried to explain, to piece together words that could justify what had happened, but nothing came out right. Daniel listened, his face blank, and then he simply walked upstairs without another word. The days that followed were unbearable. Daniel didn't speak to me, didn't touch me, didn't even look at me the same way. I begged for forgiveness, promised to end things with Ryan, swore it had been a mistake. But the truth was, it hadn't been a mistake. It had been a choice, one I made over and over again, and Daniel knew that. Eventually, he packed a bag and left. There were no dramatic fights, no scenes of rage, just silence. The kind of silence that told me I had destroyed everything. Ryan reached out a few times, but even he began to fade away when he realized the mess we had created. In the end, I was left alone, with nothing but the echo of my choices.